Coconut Creek? I'm sure you're
Oh,
familiar
even
with the
Coconut
area.
Creek.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we were in Pompano.
Yeah, so not just around the corner,
Yeah.
literally.
Not far at all. And we really connected actually through this particular, some folks know I have like 3 accounts. I can't, trying to keep track is, yeah, it's a bit much.
I get it.
Through this account. Oh, hello, people. We took a dive.
No worries.
Through this account, and which is really wonderful because I really wanted an opportunity to sort of spread it, not just people who do yoga, but people who are involved in wellness and BIPOC folks who are involved in wellness and athletics, just to talk about our experiences and share our experiences. I just mentioned Momo, she just joined. So that we can have those kind of conversations and talk about what it's like. And I think you went to, I don't want to mess it up. You went to Bethune-Cookman, did you?
Yes. Yeah. I went there for my junior and senior year. So I went to a junior college in Kansas called Independence College. And then I was recruited by Bethune-Cookman. So I played volleyball and tennis in college. Volleyball. Yeah. So volleyball was my main sport. So I was recruited by Cookman. And finished out there my junior and senior year. Then I went to UCF for my MSW, and now I'm at Berry working on my PhD.
So that's when you at Central Florida, you got your MSW there.
Yep, at UCF. Yeah.
Okay, MSWs, and PhD.
Trying to get on your level.
Hey, it's been a while since I've been in school, but oh gosh. And I wonder what was the differences for you? Like Bethune-Cookman, I'm familiar with. Our oldest son went to FAMU.
Okay.
Yeah, a little bit of rivalry there.
Just a little bit. I'll be professional today. I'll be professional with it.
Okay. Rattlers, no. And it's been a while since he was in school, but of course it was an interesting challenge for him, really, because we raised our kids in Connecticut, and although the school was in the town was extremely diverse, making a decision to go to a historically Black college, when you're used to that kind of diversity and whatever the struggles many of us have had in schools where we are very few of us, about how we're treated. It was an interesting transition. But the one thing I will remember, and you have to tell me if this is your experience at Bethune-Cookman, is when we were just walking around the campus, there wasn't a person who worked there, from a grounds person to somebody that was, cafeteria staff, who wasn't saying, welcome, we're so glad to have you. The feeling of family was so intense. It was shocking. And we had gone to, believe me, a number of schools. Was that your experience?
Absolutely. So I come from a military family. So similar to what you're describing, and my entire life was very diverse, right? So from my classrooms to my educators to my peers who lived in our cul-de-sac, everything was, for the most part, very diverse. And so, I wasn't naive to what it's like to be Black in America and be a Black woman. I wasn't naive to that. But when I went to my junior college, that's when the world hit me, right? So I was one of 2 Black women on the volleyball team, and majority of my teammates had not met a Black person in real life. So so that was totally new. That was totally new.
Yeah.
For both of us, obviously, more for them, but for me, it was like, really, where have you been? So I was very intentional about getting to a HBCU, and so I have an aunt that kind of planted that seed very early on. With attending Fisk University, just a lot. So it was like, okay, I now see the importance of this. I understand it a little more now. And so, arriving at Bethune-Cookman, it was a totally different experience as far as the support. So, you know, with being an athlete, you know, you hear the term status, but because of your, you know, who you are and what you're doing. But for me and the connection, I felt that my academic advisor, Dr. Kelsey, was kind of the first person who actually cared about who I was and the plan for what's next, right? I wasn't just a number in the class. I wasn't just an athlete she had to cross off of her to-do list to make sure our hours we were, you know, eligible. She actually cared. And she was the one that kind of ushered me into social work because, you know, when you transfer, your credits don't transfer. And I was like, I only got 2 years left in the scholarship. I'm not paying for this. You know, love Bethune-Cookman, but it is expensive, right? So I was blessed to have a scholarship. And she said, okay, we're going to get you out of here in these last 2 years. And I was able to do that. And so she helped me at least be introduced to the world of social work. So I got a minor in social work and my degree in sociology at Cookman, Cookman. And then she explained to me, you know, UCF has a really good social work program. I think you should apply there next. And that's literally how I got into it. Have family members that are social workers, but, you know, military, you don't necessarily grow up around everyone, so didn't really know much about the field. But I'm thankful that she saw something in me where she's like, I think this is the direction that you should at least explore. And here I am, years later.
Wow, wonderful. Wow. So what area of social work are you actually studying?
So I am in the new age of what we call sports social workers. But I'll give you kind of history. So after I graduated at UCF, went into healthcare. Like, you know, at that point you just want a job. I got a degree, where can I work? So I did some per diem therapy with truancy youth and their parents. And then I got a job at a hospital, mental health and a behavioral health facility. So we had substance abuse, minor medical, and majority mental health. So that was my career for this span of, let's say, almost 10 years. I was very blessed to move from like entry level to administration. So I was on the front line with our bake racks. Bake racks, doing patient restraints, calling doctors and all of that, like all of the great side of that and the horrific side of that.
Exactly.
Is what I experienced. And then I moved to administration. So I was a director and a regional director for quite some time with that company. And then towards the end of that career, I became adjunct professor at Cookman, which I still am, and got into a national tutoring program and became a center director, but technically a district manager. And so that's where my shift became, where I realized that my entire career, I was using what I learned as an athlete, but I was losing myself because self-care wasn't in my DNA. Like, it wasn't who I was. I was an athlete. You push through, you make it work, whatever the sacrifice is, you show up for that. And once I started working at the tutoring program, I would commute between here in Dallas and Houston. I started to realize, wow, like some of the kids and their parents don't know a lot about the next step after high school. If they're athletes, like they really don't know the recruiting process. They don't understand the importance of a GPA or the clearinghouse. Or it was interesting. I finally learned my leverage as a social worker and an athlete. That's where I learned that. But I had no idea about sports social work, you know. But that's where it was like, there's something here. And so in the midst of that, when I'll kind of backtrack to tell you how I got into as far as meditation, is when I left the hospital, my health, I was basically like on the verge of a heart attack, literally, according to my doctor. Wow. Because I was on call 24/7. That was my job. If something happened at the hospital, a patient eloped, a patient hit somebody, a patient death, whatever the case was, I was getting the call. And in some situations, you have to show up, right, to the hospital at 2 o'clock in the morning. And it just became too much. And the doctor told me, if you do not leave this job, you will have a heart attack in 6 months. I'm not increasing your blood pressure medication. I'm not going to tell you it's hereditary. It's stress. And at that point, I wasn't even 30 yet.
Wow.
Yeah. So I literally left the career on faith. And I literally was scrolling through Instagram once I relocated down here for the second time. I was scrolling through Instagram and I came across, I won't say the celebrity's name because now he got some stuff going on, so I won't put his name. But I came across his meditation, and something just was like, look into it. Just look into it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's literally where it started, where I downloaded the app. Person has a meditation app, learned about it, downloaded it. And I was like, this isn't what I thought it was. Literally,
mm-hmm.
right? Raised in the church, Baptist. Like, this wasn't.
I hear you.
What I thought it, like, okay, maybe. And then I decided to get a certification. So I'm a certified meditation instructor, but UCF has some continuing education courses and a full course for certifications available for alumni.
Oh.
And so that's where I tapped into it. And so I was like, let me understand it. And so that's where the self-care started for me,
mm-hmm.
along while teaching, going into the tutoring, whatever. So I was really kind of healing myself and discovering that. And then years later, here I am able to merge the two. And that's been phenomenal. But it kind of took for me to kind of spiral, to discover self-care, meditation, 3-part breathing, mindfulness.
Right.
That was completely foreign to me. So that's how I kind of got here. I talked a lot, but I hope I answered your question.
No, you really did. And so I'm making this connection. We have a little bit of a similar connection. Seriously, not a college athlete. I twirled fire batons in high school. That's about as athletic as I got.
Oh, wow. That's a whole nother level.
So yeah, no, that wasn't it. However, meditation was and is, but was the arm of yoga that brought me to the asana practice.
Wow.
So, you know, a lot of people, I was clueless, honestly. I just said meditation, okay, you know, you hear that thing, you know, prayer is talking to God, meditation is listening. You know, you hear these little about what it is, and said to myself, similar to, well, let me check it out. It's interesting. It's sort of this internal thing that happens, I think.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And then you just sort of hook into it. And so for me now, it's been, oh my gosh, about 16, 17 years med.
Wow.
But I started yoga until roughly 8 years ago.
Okay.
So, I mean, the asana practice of yoga. And that's at that point, that's when I made the connection. It's like, oh, they're connected. Actually, when you're doing yoga, because it's about letting your mind, you have to be in the moment. When they say be here now, that's exactly what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
You understand. When you're really in the groove with doing your yoga and your flow and all that, then it is meditation.
Yeah.
And people often think meditation, maybe we can talk about this a little bit. Meditation is sort of sitting there and I got my mind, got to empty my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I got to sit here cross-legged for how long? Oh my God, my back is hurting.
Literally. I mean, that's what I thought, you know, because I think representation matters. And so some of the images you can say that are kind of control the narrative of what it should look like, you know, that can take away from the true practice of it and the self-care. So you see the images of the positioning and the sitting and you just assume that's that. Right. And what I've discovered in this space is it's honestly what you make it. And I think that's where social work comes in when we talk about you meet your client where they're at. And so that was a huge thing for me because I started this journey in 2016 and I became certified, I believe, in 2017. It's gone by so fast. Yeah. So I'm still very much an infant in this, but I've seen the transformation and understanding my body and the wellness and my mindset when you shift off of that, you know, in addition to prayer, in addition to staying connected and understanding how it works. It's been very interesting, and to introduce that to athletes, it's so challenging because you're literally having to reprogram yourself, be vulnerable, and allow yourself to be in a space and not have to feel almost as if you're forced to control the next step. Right. And for an athlete, that's a lot. Right.
Right. I can remember years ago, from a clinical standpoint, we have that in common too. That's probably why we connected.
Yeah.
From a clinical standpoint, and years ago, my population at a mental health clinic in Connecticut were adolescents. And so, yeah, just think about all what it entailed. And I remember having this one client who was coming in because he started to freeze. He was in his senior year of high school, and he was up for a baseball scholarship. And so, coaches and recruiters were coming to games and practices and what have you, and he was starting to freeze up and he was starting to panic. And I remember at that point, I wasn't doing anything related to meditation. However, I was doing relaxation and visualization with patients, clients, which is dovetails for sure into the meditation.
It does.
And it was working with him to see himself on the mound and can you calm your, just the whole thing. There isn't anyone out there. You don't even see that coach from wherever. That person is not even there. To get to the point where he could relax and be able to perform. And then just a short little piece about him, come to find out, I mean, he had older brothers. He was the last to leave home. And mom was a single mom.
Gotcha.
And young Black male athlete. And he was in a sort of, in a preconscious way, I would say, sabotaging his ability to lead because he was worried about her.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So it was interesting to then have him get in touch with his older brothers and have his older brothers encourage him to, it's okay, we got you, we got mom, we got you. And just to watch that whole process. But it was so hard. And now I think about, wow, if I'd known about meditation and, things that we could have done during those sessions that would have been incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
And I don't know, do you find for BIPOC folks sort of drifting into that realm of, you mentioned being raised Baptist, got lots of Baptist ministers in the family. Amen.
Amen.
Do you think it's harder for us to sort of move into that lane, so to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. I can even say when I started my small company with doing meditation. So I had a small group of clients, and it was hard because I found myself in spaces where their belief or the direction and what they, as far as objects and what they're doing, that was an area of like, wait a minute, how far are we going? What are we doing? Wait a second. So it took me time to educate myself to understand that I can still have where I'm standing in my belief and still be able to support as we do in social work. Right. And apply that in the same way where you're not projecting it, but you're supporting.
Right.
And that was huge. So, but yes, absolutely. I mean, as far as like educating my family and saying, oh yeah, I'm getting a certification in meditation, and I'll just be funny and say the truth. You think of Tina Turner, like you're like, are you out here, Renge K, yo, like what are you doing, Marley? Like, what's happening? Because that's all That's all people. When you think about that, that's what a lot of people have said to me when I first dove into the space. And so it's like, it is tough. But I think if you have, for me at least, supportive individuals that, we'll say just family, we'll start with that understand that whatever the foundation they gave for you, that they just have to trust that you're not going to veer from that. And if anything, I'm going to incorporate it. So it was a struggle for me because it was like, how much do I share? How much do I not share? But that is, part of the reason why I got to the destruction of like losing myself and having a health crisis was because of suppressing who I was and not allowing myself to be authentic in all spaces that I show up in. And so it is tough, but I think once you explain the process and you let people know that you can really carve out your own space. I can give you those tools and the foundation. But you can still make this what you want it to be. So you don't have to lose your spirituality, your religion, whatever that is for you. And so I think that's what needs to be explained more. And, you know, that can be very tough. I mean, down here, there's a young lady that I met with that runs Yes to Yoga. And she's the only.
I know her.
Yeah. And she's the only, you know, Black yoga instructor, you know, place in this that was welcoming. Like, I ran into people, but it wasn't like, hey, can you do this? What's going on? Would love to connect. Like, when I first started, she was like one of the first people I did a video. She's like, yeah, I'll come out. No problem. And I was like, wow, like, we're really out here doing this.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to actually get her to do one of these.
She'll be awesome. I love her.
Yeah. Especially with all her health and wellness kinds of things around eating and whatnot.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that. So, any other thoughts or experiences that you could share about whether it's as an athlete, whether it's about being in a university staff, whether it's about any of those sort of hats and roles? I mean, there's so many of them that we all wear, that as a BIPOC person that you found yourself struggling with, but utilizing those tools that you mentioned, like for meditation, in order to get you through. Anything that you can share there?
I can tell you how it's allowed me. So finding the space, finding the power in breath, in breathing, in processing before I react was something that I had to learn versus, you know, we talk about reacting versus responding. That was something I really had to learn because of the athlete, you anticipate, right?
Oh, it's
so
true.
In the professional side, sometimes anticipating can trigger being defensive, right? And depending on what you've experienced and what you've gone through, it can be very tough. So coming out of college and then within 2 years being in administration, not my plan at all, but clearly God had another idea. And it was just like, okay, we're going to figure this out. We're just going to smile and pretend like we know everything they're talking about in these boardroom meetings and do some research at night and learn what this medical diagnosis is and what this medication is, because a lot of it was medical, and I just started. And so, you know, unfortunately we hear you have to be better than, you can't just be average. And so whether it's being a person of color or it's being a Black woman or coming from athletics, I know the importance of working in commitment. So what was hard for me to adapt initially before I discovered all of this was that people don't understand the process of teamwork. And not everyone necessarily wants to see you win, right? So with being an athlete, whether you're an individual sport or a team sport, it's still some type of team dynamic, whether it's just you and a coach or it's something. And that was a huge adjustment for me, that, wow, people are really not nice out here, you know, or people, my degree doesn't mean anything. So it was a lot of psychological, emotional things that I had never dealt with, stemming back to being a freshman in college, of, you know, being asked questions about your hair, or people referring to other athletes as colored. I mean, stuff that I really hadn't dealt with. It's just like, you don't know that these are microaggressions. You don't have the coaches that either don't care enough or not equipped to create that space to have a conversation. So you go years and years and years of being suppressed in this, as far as your identity and who you are. And so a part of my research now, I talk about Black identity development. And so that started from, 1966 with Marsha's model, with just identity development, and everyone kind of branched off of that. And so this is William Cross's model, but it really talks about your journey from when you enter the sport. And then if you add race and gender onto that, you get into that intersectionality component.
Right.
And it's funny, as I'm going through this journey, I literally read about my life. I'm like, wow, somebody didn't even know me.
Wow.
And they were talking about me. And so that was the hard part. I had a mentor in the field. He was a director. And I recently just told him thank you not so long ago. And he told me when I first got to administration, and he was like, I think they're going to ask you if you want a promotion, and let me talk to you, and blah, blah, blah. And he said, I think you will do really well in administration because you care and you're ethical. He said, but it's going to be very tough in administration because you care and you're ethical.
Mm.
And it was just like, okay, I hear you, but okay, you know, but until I hit those spaces where you're having those intense conversations with CEOs and you're the only Black person in the room and you don't have a place to vent. And even though I'm telling people to do therapy, I'm not in therapy. So, you know, you have all of this that you're going through. So I will say, coming down the line and having all these experiences in life, I mean, I had a colleague use the word lynched in a joking manner talking to me. Like, just mind-blowing stuff, and not having an outlet, because as an athlete, as a person that comes from a family that says, you know, with most Black people, get your job, focus on it, don't interrupt the system so you can retire and be there for 37 years and do what you're doing. And that's not who I am, right? In that regard, if you say something, if I don't agree with it, I'm going to speak up. I can be professional, of course, but when you're wrong, you're wrong. And especially if it's on behalf of my clients or my patients, I'm always going to advocate. But when you're coming to me, it's a different situation. So going back to your original question, the transformation. So I can tell you, when that individual coming out of grad school said in a joking manner, it's okay, it's not like we're going to lynch you. And I'm not exaggerating. Okay.
Oh my.
Not exaggerating. And I lost it. Like, I lost it. I absolutely lost it on this person. And to see how quickly I became the aggressive, but my response, like, I had no control over it. Like, I went off. And so I can tell, and like in that moment when I'm confronting this person, like, what did you say? What the heck is wrong? Like, going off.
You lost your mind. Oh, I can see it.
Yeah, I lost it. And this man was just like, what are you talking about? I didn't say it. What?
Are you gonna I'm crazy or something?
Exactly.
I don't think so.
And so all this stuff you hear, it was hit with it. I walked off the job. I called this. I said, you need to fix this, blah, 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 blah. Like, all this turmoil. And literally, if it wasn't for my director at that time, who was my mentor, if he didn't advocate and side with me, they would have fired me because they said it was job abandonment. Never mind that I walked out the job because of what someone said. So I'm painting that scenario to say that was my reaction. Yes, I still think it was justified, but do I know now how the game has worked and how it's played and what I need for my mental health, emotional well-being? Absolutely. So years later, when I come across situations where people literally refuse to shake my hand or they refuse to acknowledge me in a space, it doesn't disrupt my spirit, right?
Exactly.
And I can kind of take a moment and say, this is bigger than me, but what can I do so that and I literally think about this, the next encounter, the next person, what can I do to make it a little easier for them? And I don't take it personal anymore. I don't not say anything. It may be nonverbal, but I'm much more clear that this is bigger than this moment. And I'm more mindful and intentional about my words. And that has come through practice. That has come through taking dedicated time out my days and week to breathe, to ask for clarity, to sort through my thoughts, to do the imagery, to understand where am I trying to go. I'm very clear on my purpose. I'm very clear that Black athletes, Black women is where I need to be in this space. And the fact that I can look at everything and say, this had to happen. Like, I had to go through these patches to understand what identity foreclosure is and what it is to suppress who I was by being an athlete and having an athletic identity, and how that was ripped off when my career ended in college. And I graduated and life goes on. And so that's where I try to capture and explain to athletes, like, let me tell you the real experience. Like, I'm not just someone that read on this, and no shade to anybody else who doesn't play that works in this space. But I do have a unique experience with being a woman, with being Black, and usually being the youngest person in boardroom meetings and in these places where you have to speak up. And sometimes you have to be prepared for the consequences. I've been wrongfully terminated. I mean, I've had people lie on me where it's just mind-boggling. that people can walk and talk and sleep and laugh, and their spirit is so dark, you know. But I had to learn how to protect myself in those spaces. But in order to help the next, I have to prepare them for it and hopefully give them those skills so that they can step back, they can breathe. Because if you are an athlete and if you're in a space that's not welcoming of you, you can set yourself up for failure by having that outburst or having that
yes,
you know, that experience that you've been used to. That's how you survive. You stand up for yourself, but you do have to learn, but not minimize yourself. And sometimes you have to think, is my scholarship worth more than my mental well-being? That is a hard conversation to have. Like going back to the baseball player that you were mentioning earlier, with talking about family dynamics and how people are raised and what avenue was, what sports created for them, right? If it got me out of my neighborhood, if I'm the one that's supposed to make it. So it's a lot of different factors that go into place. And so I touch on a lot of that through my company, and we do workshops and athlete development.
Well, please say more about what it is that you do with your company.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
yeah. So my company is called the BFCA Experience. BFCA stands for Black Female Collegiate Athlete. And we work with all athletes, but me and a teammate, when I was telling her, you know, I think I want to start this, it was because I realized that at that moment in my life, and that BFCA chapter was what really established a foundation for me. That was all the avenues, all the identities that I realized I didn't necessarily connect with, but it was who I was. And now I can embrace all of them.
Yeah.
So when I work with other athletes, that's where I talk about the identities, whether they are male, female. It can vary by your sport and your experience. So we do athlete development workshops. We incorporate mindfulness, and we work with high school students. We work at college students. Super excited about some workshops we have coming up in the next few months. Really tapping into that transition. So a lot of things that you hear and you know people are talking about, but I tell people that I'm not like every other workshop. Like what you see and how we talk is what you're going to get. Like I'm going to keep it real. It's interactive. I'm not just lecturing you. I want to know your experience. I want you to know, like, this is the reality of it. This is what's coming next. And no, I can't necessarily prevent it from happening, but you don't have to be blindsided like many of us are. And you have to have a plan. You have to know that whether you graduated, you had a successful career, or you get an injury and it's over, at least let me plant that seed so that you understand. So we do a lot of digging, and everything I do, as I mentioned earlier, goes back to the identity development. So I really open the eyes of coaches, of players, and let's talk about when you first started the sport. Let's talk about when you were 6 years old and you started playing. And, you know, I always take them through my experience with being a volleyball player. Nobody in my family played volleyball. And my mom was just like, sure, if you want to try out for it, go ahead for it. We'll figure it out, right? And so for me, in the pre-encounter stage, is what William Cross calls it, is that I was paying attention to everything around to develop who I was. Like I was conforming to my surroundings. And as you can imagine, that can be somewhat damaging depending on the situation, or it can be a positive moment depending on what your sport you're in and all of that. But I can tell you that I can remember looking around like, okay, I should wear my hair straight when we play games, right? Oh, I need to wear tall socks instead of short socks. Oh, she wears ASIC knee pads. I need to get ASIC knee pads. Like really just trying to, whatever that identity and what that image was, I needed to be a part of that, because externally I don't look like them. So what can I do to at least fit in and not be a distraction? And you don't think like that. You don't think that you're doing that.
Right.
You know, so I open that door, and to see the aha moments, as Oprah calls it, to see the aha moments is amazing. And my goal is, anytime I interact with them, whether it's an hour, 2 hours, is to remind them of who they are at their core. That yes, you're an athlete, but our motto is value the athlete beneath the jersey. I care about you. So yes, you may have a therapist or a sports psychologist, and they do great work, but I want to be an addition to that. I want to talk about you in the classroom. I want to know about your home life. I want to know, are you prepared to live on your own after college? Or if you go back home, what is the dynamic? Are you having to move back in with your family? Are you having to work and give your mom and dad the money to help with their financial situation? COVID-19, a lot of our athletes are not playing their sport. They have made a decision to transition out of their sport because they see that, if some, not all, that maybe this wasn't for me, or maybe they really don't care about who I am. And a lot of that came from civil unrest on seeing schools not issuing statements or being more performative actions, and the athletes feeling like this ain't it, for lack of a better term. Like this is not what I'm looking for. And so we're finding that value. And so watching these players have to make a decision on something that was their everything come to almost nothing for them. So we've seen an increase of depression, of anxiety, of those that have struggled with eating disorders. We've seen an increase in that. So the mental health side of this is so real. And I did a presentation last week, and I was letting it was for professors and admin, and I let them know that this is a perfect time to get to know the student athletes in your classroom.
Absolutely.
Perfect time, because you now see home dynamic. Are they having to attend class in a closet? Like literally. Are they having to join on their phone in their car? Are they missing class because they're driving Uber Eats because their mom is in ICU? Like all real situations. And I said, don't dismiss and pretend like things aren't happening, because that's what our journey is. Usually whatever's going on outside of the court, deal with that. But when you come on the court, this is your focus. This is what's happening. And that's not how real life works. Like things happen. Yes, sometimes you have to compartmentalize it, but they're in a place where you can support them and show them how to navigate through grief and sadness. I'm like, we're social workers. Like you should be able to do that in your classroom. And if not, me to refer them or identify that so you know how to assist them. And I was thinking, if you're not doing that, I wonder what you're doing. Like, so it's she was like, well, stop. But so that's a big thing for me. So that's what we're doing. So we're really pushing to get into more collegiate spaces in these athletic departments. During the summer, we did amazing with hosting workshops, just open to the public regarding transition, life after sports. And I related the athletic experience with COVID-19 as fight or flight. So when I introduced the concept, and people were like, whoa, I never, wow, like my players or I'm going through this. So that's what we do. That's our main purpose. And we're just doing a big push. I don't know if you guys can see my shirt, Black female collegiate athlete.
You can read it reverse.
Yeah. So yeah, we just started with some shirts, and they're doing like amazing. I was like not surprised, right? Because obviously I prayed about it and manifested this. And so we have shirts for former, future, and current Black female collegiate athletes, and we just dropped our shirt for our men, so Black male collegiate athletes, and we'll eventually have the former, future option as well. So it's a mission, it's my purpose, and I'm thankful to merge social work and sports, because it is who I am. A social worker at my core, but I'm also an athlete, and once you're an athlete, you're always an athlete.
You're always an athlete. So it's it's true.
Yeah. So I've learned to understand that thought process and those patterns beyond teamwork. But when I tell people the anticipation, the ability to analyze, right, knowing the importance of repetition, and then we come into this space and they're like, oh yeah, it does look like that, or I am doing that, because I believe everything that I've accomplished comes from, one, being part of a military family. I have to say that. But also being an athlete. We're programmed a little differently. We're just a little different.
Yeah. And there to that point, there were a couple things that you said, and I said, not being an athlete in that regard. I mean, our kids were, and still are actually. It's the focus is what you said. There is this end goal. That's not the word that you use, but when you're on the court, there's this focus. Okay, so if it's basketball, it's shooting this. If it's football, then it's the touchdown. Whatever, there's this focus. And if you are removed from that focus in whatever, for whatever reason, whether it's internal stuff going on for you, or externally, or any kind of combo of negative crap, then it just could really, if that has been your, that's it, tunnel vision, that's it, it can be very disconcerting. So to be able to marry those things that you mentioned, like meditation and having people be much more mindfulness and focused on, so what do you do in circumstances like that? Because you could act like it's not happening.
Exactly.
You can act as if. I mean, hey, let's face it, BIPOC folks, we've been acting as if for a really long time.
Exactly.
And those microaggressions and that other self, so to speak, that code switching can get, it can be energy draining.
Yes.
And upsetting.
That's what happened to me. Yeah.
So
energy draining, drains your spirit, it drains every aspect of you. And we know how many folks have high blood pressure, bad eating habits. And when you look at the patterns of that, it comes from somewhere. And I can tell you, like, taking care of myself was the last area of focus. It was get to work, do what I have to do. These patients are my priority, staff are my priority. What report is due today? It's just that focus. And so it's challenging, and there's so many that experience exactly what we're talking about, but never get to the point of reckoning or self-awakening, where they make themselves a priority. And that's the hard part, that I've discovered, that I see in literature, and Lapchick, he does primarily with athletic identity. And he says that for Black athletes in general, our attachment to the sport is actually more detrimental than any other race when we transition out, because of what it means to us, what it gives to us. And people aren't necessarily feeding into that, feeding into the other areas of who we are as a woman, who you are as a student, who you are as a man, who you are as a Black man, whatever. We're not getting that. And so then you get into the real world, and no one cares about your vertical. No one's ever asked me in an interview, what was your vertical your senior year? No one's ever asked me that. Or what was my hitting average? Nobody's ever cared about any of that. But I could tell you that in most of my jobs, supervisors, managers, administration, have always been white men. And the one thing I can tell you is that when they found out I was a D1 athlete, it was like, oh. Yeah. So you learn that leverage, but it was years before I realized that was happening. That's just who I was. So I'm just being honest and telling you who I am. But it's interesting how sometimes that softened the blow of a young woman coming in, and she's like, oh yeah, CMS and EMTALA and the hospital policy and DCF and states this and da-da-da-da. They're like, you know too much for this job. You know too much. You don't know your place and your role. And so as an athlete, you learn to know your place and your role, but at what cost to yourself? And so that's what I try to explain to a lot of our young athletes in these spaces. And we have a lot of stuff coming up. I partnered with another social worker who's worked with NFL. Her name is Valen Alford, and she's an LCSW. And so we're really merging and bringing more awareness to this space. So I'm excited where the field is going. I think sports social work has honestly been around for about no more than, I would say, known about 6 years. Popular, probably the last 4 or 5 years.
Which is really fascinating, because when you said it, I'm like, okay, well, that's a new one. Not something I could have majored in. It was like straight casework, group work, policy, administration. It wasn't,
exactly.
And you did have some, what was the term? Industrial social worker, industrial psychology,
Yeah.
But I mean, we're talking, I went to grad school in the 70s. You weren't even thought about for my master's program.
But honestly, it's the same thing at UCF. There was no entrepreneurship. It was you were private practice, working in the hospital, DCF,
Yeah.
you know, blah, blah, blah. You were a box. And so I used to say I'm not your typical social worker, but now I'm like, no, I am a social worker. Like, this is what we do. We find the spaces, we identify the gaps, we find the resources, and we bring it to the population that needs it. So no, I am a social worker. And it's been incredible, because even with my doctorate and telling one of my favorite professors, she's on my committee, Dr. Heidi, she was like, so I've never heard of this, but if you want to do it, I'm sure it's out there and we'll figure it out. Yeah. So those are the folks that you need, you know, in your corner, but that's not necessarily the reality. So social work is still trying to be seen, still trying to be heard, because a lot of the positions that we would be in are taken by other disciplines who are doing a great job. Yes, true. So we have to get into these spaces to say that we want to collaborate with you. There are areas of the player and their family and their dynamics that we can tap into and allow you to still focus on the sport specifically, right? Like, why you're having anxiety when you're shooting a free throw. What are the mind blocks that you're having recovering from your injury and your surgery? Getting your mind to kind of trust that your knee is okay and you can run again. That's all stuff that's needed. But I need to dig a little deeper than that, and detach you in a way that you're supported when you're over here with me, and you have a community around. You know, we call it wraparound services. Like, that's what I want to be for the players. So through these workshops that we do, the content, I've created a community for volleyball players. So if there's any volleyball players out there that former current follow us, I'll put, well, if you go to my bio in this page, you can follow my main page and you can learn everything about what we're doing and what we have coming up.
Here's a quick question, because I don't want to keep you, and we got waylaid by the lack of connection.
No worries.
But here's a question. Have you used, or is this something that you thought about, actually using the asana practice with some of the work that you're doing? I mean, you're merging and using meditation and mindfulness and all that. So I'm just curious, have you?
It is an area that I want to tap into. And, you know, I'm trying to decide if it's something that externally we want to bring someone in who's been in that for much longer than me. I feel like we're getting to the phase to get those who are truly experts. Like, for whatever reason, this year is the year of collaboration and expansion for me in every area. So I know there's a lot that I can't get in a short amount of time. So it is an area that I do want to bring into the space. I think it's necessary. I think it's something that I need help with, to be totally transparent, because it's a commitment on a different level. Yeah. You know, and Lord knows I need it, because this doctorate is wearing me out. Yeah. But, you know, but
that's probably the same.
But no, I'm definitely on board with it. I haven't necessarily, well, maybe it's something you and I can talk about, but it is definitely something that I think is valuable. I think it's needed. You're hearing a little more about it in these spaces, but I don't know if it's giving them what they need and giving them the tools to show that it's something they can continue. Like, every time I touch base with someone, I'm like, I don't want you just to think about this when we talk. Like, I want to be able to give you the tools to let you know that you can apply this in the classroom, on your job, after graduation, that this can become a lifestyle. Right. It doesn't take away from who you are. It doesn't take away from your manhood or anything like that. But instead, it's developing you and supporting you to be stronger in all areas. So yeah, it is definitely something that I am open to, that I would love to incorporate, because when we talk to folks and we, you know, have the proposal and we're having these meetings and pitching the topics, when we talk about the mindfulness aspect, and I talk about the habits and behaviors and things to explore, especially around money for our top D1 schools and all the money they get. Yeah. We talk about that, and they're like, wow, I never thought about, you know, their exposure to finances with their family, and how when they hear this, it triggers this emotion, and maybe they don't talk about me because it causes this. And I'm like, yeah. Now think about that in every other area of their life that you have not discussed or talked about. You don't even know how many siblings they have. Like, imagine how that can make someone feel that they're not seen. And now athletes recognize that more than ever. So you're having a practice outside of the sport is huge, because most athletes, if you say, what do you do to, you know, relax, to release, to be
Yeah,
free.
yeah.
It's their sport. Oh, I shoot free throws. I go for a run, and that's great. But I want you to still have something else to do.
Right.
And so that's where I think that is important. I still want to give you something else, because I can't play volleyball anymore. No, ma'am. Like, don't call me to play on this sand. My knee will flare for 4 days. I'm back playing tennis now, you know, and that still takes a little out of me, but I can't jump. I can't do all this stuff, but I can hang with you on the court for a little bit. But it is something, it's a reality that we don't want to think about.
Right.
And unfortunately, I at least introduce that to them a little more.
Right. Well, I so appreciate it. So, you know, we have so much more that we can talk about. So we're going to have to really think about if we can do this again, and maybe have a focus. Maybe you can think more about what would be a great focused topic. Would it be athletes and mindfulness? Would it be, you know, something like that we could spend a bit more time having that conversation, and maybe even have like a Q&A or something like that, you know?
Yeah, I think it would be great. Yeah, we can plan something, have it open to folks if you want to do that, and they come in and we kind of make it a thing. I'm totally down for that. I think, you know, we need to get the message out to people, and introduce this area in different ways so that people can say, oh, I never thought about that, and try it, and introduce it to their spaces. Because athletes have their own community, and sometimes we don't go outside of that bubble, and that can be challenging. And then if you're talking about this space, we're not always there. So you don't do I go here? Do I go there? You know, so I think doing that and saying, no, we can be, this is an inclusive space if we make it.
If we make it. That's great. Thank you so much, Marley. Thank you.
No problem.
I'm good. Just for people who are watching, thank you so much. Thanks for your comments. Great conversation. Next time we will find a way, maybe if I can get the Zoom thing working, where people can cite that way, people can have, you know, so we can do like a conversation. So I will be posting this up on the YouTube channel probably in a few weeks.
Okay.
Once we this better save, or I'm gonna be seriously pissed off.
I hope it should.
But thanks so much. You enjoy the rest of your day.
And thank you. You too, and thank you for having me on. I really, really appreciate it. I followed you before, like, you even knew who I was, and I remember seeing you doing like the wine and yoga and that whole process. Right. I saw everything, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. Okay. So to meet with you, literally probably 5 years from that point, it's pretty cool. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. All right, take care.
All right, bye everyone.
Bye everybody.